Trump's plan to deport millions of people is already facing pushback, even from fellow Republicans in Congress. And our next guest believes that there's a biblical argument to make for Trump's plan, as he recently argued in his piece for the Blaze.com. BlazeTV host Steve Deace joins us now to discuss. So, Steve, a two-part question. One, any surprise because Republicans in Congress aren't playing on our team? And two, what is your argument for Trump's mass deportations?
Did you just meet me 5 minutes ago? Is my answer to number one.
I'm setting it up.
On number two, there's an entire book of the Bible called Nehemiah. One of my favorite books, by the way, and it's about a guy who returns back home to rebuild the walls of his once great civilization. And one of the things he does is mass deportations so that his culture is not, again, invaded by foreign influences that are anathema to their belief system, because he's got a heritage that he thinks he's got a providential and moral obligation to uphold. And then secondarily, in order to enforce that sentiment, he builds a wall. In fact, he spends the entire book building a wall. That's pretty much what he spends the entire book doing, and fighting people who don't want him to build said wall. So yes, I know there's going to be a lot of people in audiences like this that have been worked over by the milquetoast, lukewarm, spit out your mouth American church, but they would be what we used to call heretics.
Steve, I can't I can't express in words how much I love being able to publish you at theblaze.com writing things like this, because it's so true, and it's so one of those things that's wonderful. It's just so obvious when you point it out, like, oh yeah, that is what Nehemiah is about, huh? Mass deportations and building a wall. Interesting. So that isn't intrinsically evil. Why do you think? I mean, let me put it this way. How do we get out of this when it comes to this argument that has been so drenched in Christianity, right? This sort of false charity, this false empathy. How do we get out of it? I mean, you pointed this out. I'm curious what the response has been to your piece. But how do we move past this Christianity that is really just, it's like it's associated with a weird kind of liberalism,
I've gotten a lot of reaction, Matt, from people who had no idea what I was talking about. I mean, the last chapter of Nehemiah is one of my favorite chapters in all the Bible. He returns back home. He goes back to honor his debt to the king of Persia, because they're still technically in captivity. The Jews are, and so he goes back to honor that word in exchange for the king of Persia allowing him to come back and rebuild the walls. And he gets a report that he's only been gone for a matter of a few years, and they've already let all the bad influences into the culture. So he goes back to Jerusalem again, Matt, and then he just goes full Russell Crowe gladiator, at my command, unleash hell. And he literally talks about, I pulled out their beards and I beat these people for you, Lord. Remember what I did for you. That's literally how the final chapter of Nehemiah ends. And if you were to put that home in the hands of many of today's pleated khaki, sweater-vested brigade that not inhabits as much as infests the pulpits of America. I mean, it would be like watching when water hits the Wicked Witch of the West. You'd watch them just sit there and dissolve right there. And then most of the women that are there, because it's mostly women that are in our evangelical churches these days, there's very few men. I don't know what it's looked like on your Catholic side, but it's pretty much the Rotary Club on the evangelical church, brother, except for the Calvinists and the Pentecostals. There are two groups that are often in opposition. They're bringing them in, and everybody else, man, it's just we're sitting here knitting sweaters, okay? And, I mean, the blue hairs would be sitting in the front row. I can't even, I thought we were supposed to be nice until death. But, yeah, I mean, and the fact, by the way, that this has to get published at the Blaze and is not taught from the pulpit, and the fact that a guy who once referred to 2 Corinthians is probably inadvertently more biblical on this than the vast majority of the church indicates, frankly, why we probably needed a Trumpian figure for this era. The church just, frankly, is not up to the task, man. It long ago abrogated. It took Gideon's golden fleece. It took it to the pawn shop, see what it could get for it.
Steve, I don't know if you can come up with a biblical analogy for this, but DC and NYC Mayor Eric Adams just said to cancel him for working with the border czar Tom Homan and Donald Trump. He said, cancel me because I'm going to protect the people of this city. He said, illegals are committing crimes, robberies, shooting police. I'm sorry. He's a Democrat mayor of New York City. I don't know if you can come up with a biblical analogy for that one, but we're happy that he's actually going out there and speaking the truth.
I mean, the rain falls on the just and the unjust alike there, Jill. I'll come up with an analogy for anything. All right. May not be good, might not be accurate, but I'll give it my best shot. I think this is just good old-fashioned self-interest. And I said on the show here today, half tongue-in-cheek, but half serious, about some rumors I've heard about Nancy Mace primarying Lindsey Graham. I mean, I long for the days of grandstanding. I want to make self-interested politicians great again. I mean, if we're going to have a post-Christian culture, I mean, even in a Christian culture, there's a very limited amount of people that will do the right thing altruistically for the right reasons. So how many do you think there are in a non-Christian or post-Christian culture? Not many, right? So in that case, I'll take self-interest. Nancy Mace, clearly just a creature of self-interest, just craven to the point that you almost have to applaud. It's so shameless, right? Against Lindsey Graham, whose interests are just opposed to me. I mean, self-interest, I can buy off someone of self-interest, right? If someone's interests are just opposed to mine, I can't be aligned with them or trusted, or can I trust them? In the case of Eric Adams, I think this is his self-interest. The Biden regime's going after him. I think he'd like a pardon. But then also, his city's on the list of the 12 cities most racked with illegal alien crime. So I also think, the chance to, now he's got political cover. They've thrown him under the bus. They're coming after him. He wants a pardon. So there's really no reason for him to continue, carrying that burden on their behalf and inflicting the pain upon the citizens of New York City. He's got political cover now to act in his own self-interest.
Steve, I mean, that was a logical explanation for why Eric Adams is doing what he's doing. What is the logic moving forward to ensure that Trump is actually able to enact mass deportations and, build the wall, as it were?
Well, if you go back to his first term, almost everything other than the tax cut that he did that was good, Matt, he had to do via executive action. There was just no assistance there from the Republican Party. In this case, I think he's way more prepared for that. He's been way more aggressive. There's a senator from Oklahoma who's just a complete waste of oxygen, like a lot of these red state senators, Markwayne Mullin. And he was coming out saying, well, I don't know about Hegseth and Gates. And then, of course, Gates ended up stepping away. But Trump put out a message on Truth Social. Hey, I really like that Markwayne Mullin, and then reminded him he's more popular with his constituents than he is. He got more votes than he did. He's won every single county and precinct in Oklahoma in the last 3 presidential elections. That's kind of the political version of, that's a nice barbershop you have there on the waterfront, man. Be a shame if something happened to it, right? And there's going to have to be, I think, be a lot of that. And one of the biggest reasons that I didn't back Trump in the primary is I didn't think he would be capable of this. I saw him too often not push buttons, not lean on Paul Ryan when he had the chance his first term, try to cut deals with Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell and hire his wife, Elaine Chao. But this time, now all the stuff that they said about him that he didn't live up to his first term, dude is like living up to it before his second term even starts. And I am here for it. Pop the corn. We have not yet begun to clutch pearls, and I look forward to him turning Washington, D.C. into Crime Alley.
I can't wait to see it there along with you. Let's go ahead and look up for the plans this weekend for Donald Trump. We're going to talk Notre Dame because we're talking about the cathedral, not the Fighting Irish. Trump is going to be there for the grand reopening. It's been 5 years since the fire, so the restoration is now complete. So what do you make of Donald Trump and his spiritual journey that he has taken then since July 13th and just him going over there for the grand reopening?
Well, it's going to make me feel old, Jill, but I know you kind of almost grew up listening to me. And so, I have long said, going back to when I was a local radio host, if I had a plug nickel for every time someone told me a Republican has had a spiritual awakening, all right, I'd own my own Mar-a-Lago right now, okay? In this case, though, I have heard this from a lot of people who in the past have snickered at this alongside with me, who have been around the former president and know him and his team fairly well. I think you see his own behavior. I mean, the level of restraint that he has demonstrated, the unwillingness to just wallow in the shallow end of the pool. And I go back to election night, man. And if there was ever anyone, I mean, you wouldn't even need the robust ego of Donald Trump. You could have the T level of most Republican senators. And after all you've been through, which is low, by the way, after all you've been through, and then you win an election like that, to come out and do the full Como D, how you like me now, no one would begrudge you of that. And yet he didn't do that on election night. He made it about the issues. He talked about RFK Jr. and others. And I was really struck by that. And the discipline that he has shown since, by the way, it's forced them to kind of now turn on each other, because we're not doing urination contests and really a bunch of stuff that, other than a few people on Twitter, no one else in America cares about, because we can't meme it, And so I think that he's governing well already, showing great discipline already, casting a vision already. So and I think now he kind of views himself as maybe a herald of Western civilization, to borrow a phrase from one of his most noteworthy opponents, a bulwark, if you will, on behalf of Western civilization. That cathedral is a symbol of Western civilization. What happened to it when it was burnt to the ground, and then only I think it was the altar mat was what remained, I think is a symbol of the spiritual battle that's happening right now within Western civilization. And Trump won Catholics by an obscene level, 15 points in the last election. So I think it's prudent and appropriate for him to do this.
I mean, Donald Trump, he didn't do the "How do you like me now" on election night. It was wee hours into the early morning, Steve. A lot of things were cut there late in that early morning hour. But thanks so much for joining us and breaking this down for us.
You bet.
Yeah, I do appreciate what he has to say just about the mass deportations. Pop the corn, as Steve said.
Yeah, I mean, it is like there's only so much you can do at this point, right? I mean, there's a sense of you get to kind of open the Christmas presents and see what's in them. Some of them you might not like, but overall, it's super exciting. And you also get the sense of the dedicated seriousness. And I love Steve. He has his opinions, he holds them strongly, and he comes to them honestly. And you can see what he's saying is, I trust it even more, right, because of the journey that he's been on. So good stuff.